Hello, welcome to Halloween Effects 4 of 6, all about enhanced cognition. Cognition is the collection of sensory perceptions and other intakes that we have for information and our ability to synthesize that information with other information and come up with thoughts and ideas and perceptions. And then knowledge, you could ultimately call the collection of that knowledge. So cognition is everything we do all the time in some ways, and then at the same time it's something that we can purposefully do if we want. And that's kind of the category that I'm mostly talking about here, is the ideas about how to enhance our thinking. Our chefs or our examples are two people, Daniel Tammet, and I added in Temple Grandin, two beautifully autistic savants. Daniel Tammet, there's a documentary that you should definitely, I'll link here, and you won't believe your eyes because his brain does things with math that you can't believe. The way he sees in his head is in these pops, as he calls them, pops, which is also the name of my dad, who used to fly a little airplane like that, but he passed away from cognitive decline, Lewy body dementia, which is associated with Parkinson's. I can say that the most beautiful brain in the world belongs to Daniel Tammet because of the pops in his brain. He describes them as flashes and bangs of light that basically give him the answers to incredibly complex mathematics questions that he can just answer in his head for no apparent reason. It's magic almost. He can recite pi out to 22,514 numbers without making an error. He's done it on camera with the Guinness Book of World Records, documenting it. It's all in the documentary. He has something called synesthesia, and he uses that. It's a condition in the brain where certain different parts of the brain, their signals might get crossed. So for example, famously, for a lot of people with synesthesia, go into this big brain we have here. This is a new section that I've drawn, the sensory area, the somatic areas. They might have their senses of sight and smell crossed. If they see blue, they may smell roses. Sounds strange. Brains are different, every single one of them. Your mileage might vary. You're not going to get a pop like Daniel Tammet is. You're not going to be able to answer the kinds of questions that he has. But if you could figure out a way to get your kid to eat vegetables, and if you're thinking hard about that, and that's your thing, that you want to figure out how to get this kid to swallow vegetables, and you have an epiphany, I put the vegetables in a shake that they like. That's a pop. That's great. However your brain works for you is what pops means in this case. Temple Grandin, as she says, I see in pictures and connect them. And she does. She made a lot of really interesting engineering contributions, especially to the field of animals. She was an ethologist, autism advocate, and an author of a book called Emergence, using the concept of a costume parade and kids participating in something bigger than just themselves, maybe for the first time. These early ideas can lead to some of the bigger ideas that I've written here, just like emergence, which is something bigger than the one individual part that emerges from the collection of parts, as represented in the butterfly effect. Small changes to initial conditions can have a big downstream effect. That's the traditional definition of the butterfly effect. Chaos theory, I quickly listed out its key elements. There's its kind of traditional representation, the 8-sided multi-directional arrow emanating from a central point. And then the inherent repetition, the patterns, the interconnectedness, the self-similarity, and the constant feedback loops, self-organization, These are the kinds of shapes and pictures that he sees. People who are on the spectrum typically like order, predictability, and so looking for patterns is normal, and they see it. We should all be looking for patterns, and these are some of the things that are common in these. You get into things like complex systems, biophysiology, fractal geometry, the way that nature organizes itself in certain patterns is comparable to the way that we are biophysiologically organized. Now, this one I wrote in here, epilepsy, because it speaks to the chaos of the brain when there's so many neural connections, too many. See how that looks busy? That's not even close. So there's a lot of connections. In a newborn baby, there is way more than there is in an adult, because what's happening is they're born with all these connections and they eventually need to pare some away. There's just too much going on. And so an epileptic seizure is essentially very comparable for a sufferer of the epilepsy to reverting back into that infant-like state where they can't maybe control their bodily movements anymore, just like an infant can't. Their arms are flailing, they're scratching their face and everything, how babies are. And so That's what epilepsy is. It's a simulation of the state where there's all the neurons firing at once. Eventually, an infant learns to stop firing the scratch your eye neuron and start firing the suck your thumb neuron. They learn the difference, and the unneeded neural pathways are depotentiated. Remember, we talked about that, and they're paired away so that only the remaining ones are worked on, and the baby learns to walk, and the baby learns to run, and all the other things. Evolution, I really love to talk about prehistory, but let me leave it to the experts. Stefan Milo, YouTube, North02, incredible YouTube channel on prehistory, and Ed Burkhart. He's pretty well out there in the circuits and everything. He's a archaeoastronomer, pretty cool. He's a mathematician, and he's incredibly insightful about, especially the Mayan culture. He worked with like the greatest Mayan archaeologist of all time, his Professor Linda, I don't remember her last name, but his mentor. There's just a lot to learn from our evolution. That, for example, I'll give you a quick one here, is that Neanderthals would have had a bigger brain. They would have like a 1300 cc brain, where ours might be between 11 and 13. So theirs was a little bigger, and they had a particularly overdeveloped occipital lobe. Their sight was incredible, because of their environments and everything. They also had some other differentiating features from us, like us being Homo sapiens. We had much more of an ability to throw a projectile spear. Their physical chunky bodies were made for stabbing. They would only stab at the beasts, the fauna, with their spears. We threw the spears. We lasted. Culture plays into everything, and it's so interesting to understand these ancient prehistoric cultures that led up to where we are. So we like order. We've implemented societies, and that's how we deal with this complex chaos. We implement patterns and self-organization, and that's humanity's story so far. The recipe for emergence, how does it kind of happen inside the brain? What's going on? Some of the ways that you can maybe foster it. The brain's creativity network has certain parts that we talk a lot about. Prefrontal cortex says, I want to think about something. Hippocampus gets involved here with memories and abstract associations. Some involvement from the cerebellum, newly drawn on this version of the brain. It has some really important balance and movement and cognition functions that are tied up into it. I also put on here the motor areas, because these are for purposeful movement. These are distinct from like the heartbeat and some of these hindbrain, autonomic functions. But this is I want to move my arm to suck my thumb. Therefore, I'm going to do that. Somatic areas up there. Sensory inputs are coming. Okay, next. Divergent and convergent thinking are ways of thinking, with divergent meaning that you would cast your thinking as widely as you can. Everything is a good idea. You get it all down on a list. Convergent is you start to, as we said before, pair away. Plasma-like thinking is my way of describing the unique state of matter that plasma is, which is an ionically charged gas. So it behaves in unique ways, and I think that you want your thinking to be very nimble and almost even unpredictable, so that you could go in any direction. Dreamlike thinking, when you're in between that waking and dreaming state, your brain is far less inhibited by the rules of gravity or whatever. This has famously been a way of learning put forward and described by Ray Kurzweil, who is honorably mentioned here. Sleep twilight disinhibition method, I call it. I don't know what he calls it, but he's a great inventor. When he is working on a major invention, he's thinking about a really intractable problem. He purposely goes to sleep thinking about it, knowing that in his dreams, the rules don't apply. If you're talking about the Wright brothers, they say to themselves in their half awake, half dreaming, I can fly, whereas in their normal day, they might not have accepted that possibility. So we don't know where their idea came from, but good ideas come from dreams. But you can purposely enter into that state so that it's not really in the dream that you're going to get your breakthrough. It's right before you fall asleep, when you're halfway in between, or right when you wake up. So maybe that's worth trying. I'm not going to jump into Richard Feynman's 4-step thinking method, but it involves learning a thing and then asking questions about it and then teaching it to someone else. Cybernetics-based approach. This is my recursive loop within the creativity centers of the brain. This time we're cooking in the Grand Prismatic Spring at Yellowstone. It actually looks like that. I'll roll in a picture here. It's really cool. But it gives off these good effects, and these effects, they go to these air traffic controllers here. That's so important that we help them have stress relief. There's something called air traffic controller syndrome, where their vitals can just spike at any given time. That's what we call it. I mean, I have some friends in that business and that industry that are just very dedicated people that have very unique cognitive capabilities. There's only a certain small percentage of people that can even do that job. This is a particular example of the kinds of people that we ought to give them different ways to think and ways to reduce stress and to have better biophysiological outcomes and effects here. So the effects are deeper insight, increased sensory perception, increased creativity, and some percentage of Temple Grandin or Daniel Tammet like pops when these ideas just pop. So that's what we're going for. And the word emergence or emergent effects is represented by this little diagram here. So we're using this 4-circle increasing size circle to represent emergence as a shorthand here. My dad, this is his pilot log. That's about all I have to say about that. The brain, when it's doing its magic and its most beautiful process called neuroplasticity and it's making its new connections, that is the world's most beautiful natural phenomenon of all. You know, I mean, baby being born, all that. Yeah, okay, sure, that. And then the neuroplasticity, but really the babies, they, like I said, they have all these neural connections and they've got to pair them away. Just watching a baby learn is neuroplasticity in action. It is also possible for you to induce neuroplasticity when the conditions are just right. As we've talked about in these other videos, you've got to get everything just right. Chemicals have to be right. And when you do that, beautiful things can emerge. Just like in this parade, all these little kids start walking together and it emerges. We're walking together. We are the parade. The parents are all interested. We're the big parade. They're all like in this special world together. Mike Wazowski and the AI overlord robot. Beautiful things can happen. And if you want to see some really beautiful things documented, check out the Society for Cloud Appreciation. I've been in technology all my life, and I'm pleased to say this is not a reference to the cloud. This is like the clouds. There's some British guy, I wish I could remember his name. I think it might be like Gavin something. And he just one day started this thing called the Society for Cloud Appreciation, where people just send in these beautiful pictures that they've taken and they appreciate them. A standard rainbow when the light source is behind the viewer and there's some sort of a medium through which the light is refracted, dispersed, and reflected in terms of light physics there. The next one I drew here is the northern lights, which of course are emanations from the sun, plasma particles that the sun shoots out, and when they collide into elements within our high atmosphere, you see either those amazing green or blue surreal looking things that cause enhanced cognition. I mean, you can't see that and then think the same anymore. And then the next one is the halo. This is something you may have seen. If you've ever looked up at either the sun or the moon, or technically any celestial body that's bright, it may have a light, glowy-ish ring far, far outside it, way outside it. It would almost look like a ring of clouds. Start looking up, especially when the moon is full, and also in the sun, especially in the winter, because a halo is a refraction of light from high atmosphere ice crystals shaped like hexagons. The coolest of them all, though, is the corona. If you're really lucky and you look up one time when there's the sun or the moon, don't look right at the sun, needless to say. But if you look up and there's clouds and they're just the right kind of clouds and conditions are just right, just like neuroplasticity, then what emerges is a lunar or solar corona, which looks just like that picture, kind of. They are concentric rings or something like it around the sun or the moon in the clouds through the diffraction of light through the droplets of water in the clouds. And the more potent and beautiful the corona is dependent on the droplet size. If you have very uniform droplet size, you have a very tight, uniformly ringed corona. Bigger droplets can give you some really different and beautiful effects. You're probably seeing them in the pictures that I'm rolling in now. This young lady that's looking at this corona here, she's looking at that and thinking, oh, wow, that's amazing. And if only that corona that's right around the immediate part of the moon or the sun could also be inside of a giant halo. See, that's what she's thinking in that picture there. That's like the Holy Grail being rolled in. It's time to share them with the cloud appreciation folks. I've been meaning to do it for a few years. This is my grand prize, the lunar corona in front of the northern lights. Okay, with that, I'm going to end this video and thank you so much. Encourage you to watch the next one and give you one last effect to enjoy.